Today we take a look at some of the chapter's most elite marksmen, dish out the combi weapons and load the special issue ammunition, because today we're looking at Sternguard veterans. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. In today's video we're continuing our look at Space Marine datasheets, with a focus on one of the more iconic firstborn datasheets, the Sternguard. I remember when these guys first came out, and I really thought it was quite a good idea. Basically Games Workshop giving some upgraded stats to some standard bolter marines, making them a bit more of a force to be reckoned with on the table compared with the slightly underwhelming tactical marine profile at the time. I must admit, even today, when the standard bolter armed Space Marine is still pretty scary, these guys still have a certain cool factor about them. There's something pretty inspiring about some of the chapter's best marksmen, with the option of all of their nastiest weapons of choice from the chapter's armory. In this video we're going to take a look at their datasheet, compare them to a few different competitors, talk about how to get more out of them, and focus on one particular loadout that I'm a really big fan of in game. So here we have the datasheet for the Sternguard Veteran Squad. They are of course a Space Marine Elites unit, 20 points per model, and you get between 5 and 10 Sternguard veterans, who essentially have a standard Space Marine profile with 2 attacks. I do find it pretty interesting that statline wise they're basically the exact same as Intercessors with one more pip of leadership, and even their standard war gear, the special issue bolt gun, is pretty much the same as the bolt rifle. It's a 30-inch strength 4 weapon, the only additional buff it has is it's AP-2, not AP-1. I'm afraid sadly gone are the days when these guys used to get special issue ammunition much the same way that the Death Watch do. Still though, bolters with extra AP really aren't bad to have at the moment. Space Marines are quite prevalent. Often a standard bolt shot with no AP won't get you very far, so these guys might be a little bit better against the general meta. Much like their Vanguard veteran equivalents, they do have a fairly decent array of options, and perhaps the most important is their access to any weapon from the combi weapons list. Every single model can take a combi weapon if they want, and compared with the rest of the Space Marine army, the Sternguard veterans get these all for 5 points per model, not 10 points. For me, these discounted combi weapons are probably the best reason to take Sternguard veterans compared with other options. Firstly, you could have Marines armed with Storm Bolters for 23 points per model. That's going to get you a very respectable 40 shots out of the full squad, though of course you don't get the AP on that. And I could happily see myself taking either Combi Flamers, Combi Melters, or Combi Plasmas. They're only 5 points, so for example a Sternguard veteran with a Combi Flamer, that's going to get even more strength 4 hits at 12 inches than a Storm Bolter if you do fire both profiles. Combi Melters and Plasmas both have their advantages, obviously Melters being better against tanks and Plasma better against heavy infantry, though they do come with a bit of a trade-off. If you fire both profiles then they're going to be -1 to hit. Often it means that you're just going to be wanting to fire your special weapon profile, not both. For me, I think that the Sternguard do have multiple viable options. The standard special issue bolt gun, Storm Bolter, or one of those combi weapons. In terms of other options, the Sergeant has his usual array of various different combat weapons and pistols. The only exception being is that for some reason he's locked out of being able to take a Thunderhammer. I'm not really sure the reason for this, maybe it's partly to try and underline the fact that they're a ranged specialist squad, but it seems a bit weird seeing as tactical marines can take them. The squad's never going to be crazily potent in melee, but a cheap lightning claw could certainly make them a little bit more fighty, and a power fist could make them a bit more of an incidental threat to things like heavy armour. Finally, 2 Sternguard veterans have the option to take a heavy flamer, or one weapon from the heavy weapons list or special weapons list. The heavy flamers are an interesting unique choice to them, and they can actually combo quite well with things like a big squad of combi flamers if you want maximal flamey goodness, as some chapters very much do. Otherwise, I'd be thinking about things like multi-melters from the heavy weapons. Could think about adding a bit more of a real anti-tank punch into the units, though I would bear in mind that when you're trading out these heavy weapons, you are giving up the options of very cheap combi weapons, and they're already fairly dangerous AP-2 bolter. Still though, I think you could certainly justify a heavy weapon or two, if you were mainly thinking that this squad's going to be used as more of a backline fire support squad, sitting around on home objectives. Aside from this, the veterans have their usual Space Marine special rules, Angels of Death giving them the all-important bolter discipline for 2 shots out to 30 inches, extra AP with those shots in the tactical doctrine, and a little bit of extra muscle with shock assault, meaning that each veteran will still be putting out a fairly respectable 3 attacks at strength 4 on the charge, so should still be very dangerous to light infantry. So as we well know, Space Marines do have access to quite a lot of bolter armoured troops these days. I think these guys are definitely going to get weighed up against Intercessors, at least on their base loadout, as their stat line and gun are almost exactly the same. If we are just weighing up the standard bolter armoured version, the Sternguard do have their advantages. They get AP-2 bolters, they can use different transport options such as drop pods and rhinos, and they do have a lot more flexibility, allowing you to seed in special or heavy weapons if you wanted the majority of the squad with bolters, but just add a little bit of bitey punch. The intercessors and tactical marines, on the other hand, do help by filling up a troop slot for the all-important patrol and battalion detachments. They gain OBSEC for that privilege as well, and the intercessors have access to transhuman physiology and rapid fire, both really powerful ways of upping their durability and damage. I think for most general purposes, people are going to field intercessors more just for troops starting on the board. I'm just not sure that extra pip of AP -1 really justifies you sacrificing one of your damage dealing elite slots compared with one of your bog standard holding the line troops choices. Transhuman is pretty excellent to have as well if your opponent does start to focus them down. Against tactical marines, they are 2 points more expensive, but you do get quite a lot of extra muscle out of them. The extra AP -2 will make those bolters go far further, as will the 6-inch range. They get an additional attack in close combat, as well as far better heavy and special weapon options. So just for how effective the unit is, I'd say the Sternguard win hands down. Again though, it's being a trooper's choice and getting OBSEC that is going to draw people to tactical marines. Of course, they're not just competing against troops, but all of the dangerous damage-dealing marine elites as well, such as veteran intercessors for example. They can give you a few more attacks on a very similar profile, so you could see them as a bit of a melee-focused alternative. To be honest though, in terms of pure damage output coming out of the unit, I think it is kind of hard to justify standard bolter-armed Sternguard over other choices. They'll be fairly effective against things like Space Marines or Sisters of Battle, but not really have much scope beyond that. As I said, I think it's cheap convy weapons that are really going to sell this unit. In terms of buffs and synergy for the Sternguard, there's not really all that much complicated here. I think that certain chapters have far more affinity with them than others. Imperial Fist for extra bolt shots and ignore cover never goes down badly. Salamanders if you're loading up with combi melters or combi flamers, as we'll look at in just a second. Ultramarines have the potential for putting out some accurate rapid fire on the move, and others such as Raven Guard and Iron Hands also have their advantages. I would bear in mind that Sternguard veterans can't be taken by Death Watch, Space Wolves or Dark Angels. They all have their own veteran equivalents, in particular Death Watch, who can spam out combi weapons just as well on their kill teams. As core infantry, they can stack pretty much any buffs that you want in the Space Marine Codex on them. Of course, things like Captain and Lieutenant reroll auras and Chaplain listeners are never going to go badly, and you could use things like Apothecary, the Chapter Ancient, or Psychic Barrier from Librarians. All this is fairly standard stuff for a Space Marine battle line. I'd be most tempted by a simple reroll aura or two, and perhaps an Apothecary to give them a feel no pain. Perhaps one of the most useful buffs that you can get on them is to use the Codex Warlord trait that allows you to make them OBSEC. That could certainly allow them to compete a bit better with the other tactical marines and troops, as now you're no longer having to weigh up between a better gun and being OBSEC or not. Provided you hang around near that character, then they can have OBSEC as well as being able to fire and fight a little bit better than average. Compared with units like Intercessors, I think that their transport options are quite a boon in their favour. They can take the nice cheap and effective Rhino to deliver them and their combi weapons into battle, but between these guys and Devastators, I think that they're some of the most effective units to pile into a drop pod. You are paying a premium for the drop pod, so you need to have about the most hardest hitting Space Marines piling out of it as you can, and the main weakness of the combi weapons is that they need to get really close, so a deep striking drop pod is likely to be one of the best matches that you can get. Finally, we have stratagems, and they are really quite limited for the Sternguard unfortunately. They used to have that really excellent one where they got their +1 to wound with their special issue bolt guns, but I'm afraid that's no longer there. It's going to be just fairly standard stuff for the Space Marines, things like being able to move and rapid fire with steady advance, or the one for doing an action while shooting. Typically I wouldn't be looking to spend too many command points on the Sternguard unit from the core Codex stratagems. So perhaps one of the most effective loadouts for Sternguard in 9th, I think, is a Salamanders Sternguard full of combi melters or combi plasmas. It's 25 points per model if you arm them with a combi melter or flamer, an extra 70 for the pod, so a total of 320 points. Quite an investment, but they can hit abnormally hard. I'm just going to talk about a very simple loadout for these ones, but if you wanted to add yet more damage dealing, you could think about throwing in a couple of multi-melters or heavy flamers if you desired. You could also get some rerolls on the go, maybe a captain or a lieutenant to take the damage output to the next level. The numbers and stacking buffs that you can get on these is really quite scary. If we have the big squad of combi flamers arrive, you can pay 2 command points for flamecraft, and that one will make every single flamer have the maximum 6 hits on the enemy. That's 60 auto hits with flamer weapons, plus an average of around about 10 bolter hits from the rest of the squad's firepower, all with +1 to wound and -1 AP from the Salamander's unique tactical doctrine. This sheer amount of flamey goodness should render down virtually any target that it chooses to attack. It's only really going to struggle against really tough things with things like 2+ saves. On average, you get a pretty monumental 44 dead Orc boys, 21 wounds to a standard Space Marine squad, so should wipe them out of existence, or about 15 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle. A little bit command point intensive with 2 CP for Flamecraft, but thoroughly devastating. If you really need every bit of damage output, you can also get 3 mortal wounds from another Salamanders Stratagem too. The Combi Melter loadout is a little bit less generalist. Of course it won't do you anything good against hordes, but it'll be far better against heavy vehicles, particularly toughness 8. 10 melter shots with +1 to wound on the drop, plus a reroll for the Salamander's chapter tactic, averages you around about 20 wounds on a toughness 7 vehicle. Not bad at all, and having AP-5 melter guns means they're not going to worry about targeting anything with a very, very high save. In addition to all this damage, you can also try and think about charging in. Obviously it's not going to be quite as much damage as they're shooting, but an extra 30 odd strength 4 attacks should certainly put some hurt on an enemy light infantry unit. So overall, I'd conclude that Sternguard veterans are a unit that certainly has a niche within the codex, though just kind of struggle a bit due to army construction and lots of other similar options being available. As a unit in terms of their defense and damage output, they're really not far behind other Marines troops options, but I think that it really won't hurt money lists very much at all to include them over other options. You'll likely occasionally feel it when you don't have OBSEC, but it'll be quite nice enjoying those AP-2 bolters at other times. In terms of damage dealing though, I think that people might overlook them in favour of other options. They are a bit pricey and a bit all eggs in one basket if you want to go for the drop pod damage dealing approach, and people might be a bit more tempted to go for things like Devastators or Primaris Eradicators. In general though, I think that they still remain fairly usable. They're very easy to customise to certain battlefield roles if you have one in mind, and they're certainly the place to go for cheap combi weapon spam. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'll be interested to hear if you've used Sternguard in 9th, whether or not it's dropping a pod full of Salamanders on your opponents, or using them as a bit more of a ranged backfield type unit. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, but we'll certainly be keeping the videos coming, including plenty more for the Space Marines. And if you have been enjoying my videos recently, I would just like to mention that the channel has a Patreon page, which you can find down in the video description. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, such as seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry to the channel's regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits every single month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.